Good morning and welcome to the onboarding track for Wingspan's 1099 contractor account payable course. We're excited for you all to join us today. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. We'll give some folks some time to trickle in. So if you're listening to this on demand, feel free to skip the next couple minutes and we'll get started shortly. Alrighty, let's go ahead and get started today. We're super excited to talk to you all about onboarding 1099 contractors. One huge shift that's happening right now in the U.S. is kind of the shift towards flexible work, where today actually 1 in 3 U.S. workers perform some work on a contract basis. And for account payable and finance teams, it's super important that they get those folks on board, verified, eligible, and ready to go ahead and be deployed out in the field or take on kind of their workload to fulfill their contract. So today is going to be all about onboarding those contractors and make sure that you are doing that efficiently, reliably, and compliantly. This is part of a 3-track webinar series that's going to cover the full contractor lifecycle. So if you are in the account payable or finance space and you onboard and pay a lot of contractors, this is the webinar series for you. We're going to be covering 3 separate topics. So like I mentioned, today's the onboarding track. We'll talk about how to streamline contractor onboarding and verification. The second section session is all about payment. So now that they're onboarded and verified, they've done some work, you need to actually go and pay them. How do you make those contractor payments reliably, quickly, and in an accurate manner? That's going to be taking place in 2 weeks. And then the final track is all around creating and filing that 1099 at the end of the year during tax season. So how do you save time, money, and headache when it comes to managing that process? We'll be hosting that webinar on Wednesday, August 14th. We are super excited to share some of our learnings with various other folks in the field. As a kind of frame of reference, Wingspan is a payroll platform that's purpose-built for 1099 contractors. So we work with a lot of accounting and finance teams that kind of face some of these challenges on a daily basis. And we have basically distilled down some of the challenges that they've faced, some of the solutions that they've implemented into this webinar series so that we could share it with all of you. My name is David Henry. I'm the head of marketing here at Wingspan. I'm just hosting today. So our real expert is Kerri Florian. She's the senior accounting manager here at Wingspan. She has over 15 years of experience working both in-house for companies like Wingspan, but also in agencies and kind of working with a variety of different firms. So she's actually supported over 100 companies throughout her career and brings a really awesome set of experience and expertise to the conversation. We're really grateful that you could join us today, Kerri.
Thanks, David. I'm excited to be here with everyone. Welcome to our first webinar. We have a bunch of finance and accounting people on the line, specifically from companies who run on contractors. So I'm excited to be with my peers and colleagues and hopefully add some value to your day as we go through the next 20, 30 minutes.
Great. Just in terms of housekeeping, we will be recording this session and sharing it with everyone who registered. So don't feel the need to take notes. We've got that covered for you. The second piece, of course, is that we will be ending with a Q&A. So as we work through some of these topics and some of these themes, if questions come up, feel free to submit them in the question box. We'll collect them and make sure that they're addressed at the end of the call. We want this to be collaborative and conversational. So feel free to pipe in as it makes sense, and we'll address those specific questions at the end of the session. So let's kind of set the stage a little bit for why onboarding really matters. And I think, when you think about W-2 employees, onboarding is something that happens once, and it's a, exclusive working relationship. You work with that employer for, an indefinite amount of time. You're onboarded once, et cetera. That is really turned on its head for contractors, a lot of times doing contingent work or kind of contract project-based work. And in those scenarios, onboarding is something that can happen multiple times. It can be recurring. Specific requirements as it relates to onboarding can lapse and need to be verified later on. And we really see onboarding as being a critical inflection point where it's garbage in, garbage out for the entire accounting and account payable process. So when it comes to things like processing payments, invoicing, and ultimately closing the books at the end of the month, quarter, or year, having really solid onboarding is absolutely critical to that being streamlined. Kerri, I'm curious, what role has onboarding played, and especially when it comes to like things going well for you as a finance leader? Share a little bit on that side of things.
Sure. Yeah. When things go well, we have all the information we need right at our fingertips so that we can easily make payments. We can easily close the books, as you mentioned. We can easily file the end of the year 1099s, and we can easily make the contractor happy, which is, one of our goals when we're working with a lot of contractors, is wanting them to want to rework with us.
Yeah, I think that, brings up a good point. And ultimately, that's why we see contractors as really having, a unique set of challenges. So some of the things that our customers have been challenged with in the past that we've helped resolve is like classification. Is this worker a contractor? Should they be on W-2? What makes the most sense for this person? Obviously, verifying that W-9 and TIN. There's nothing worse than chasing down a bad TIN number and needing to do that after the fact. And what is kind of lost in the middle is this kind of messy middle concept where the contractor doesn't really know what's going on. And a lot of times the finance team doesn't necessarily have access to the information that they need to resolve some of these issues. Kerri, what is kind of the impact of that on both accounting teams, but also the business and ultimately the contractor experience as well?
Yeah, well, if we're hiring these contractors, we're typically needing them to start right away. And if we're not getting the information right away to be able to set them up for payments, to get them into our system, to be able to start communicating with them, things are going to get delayed. And when delays happen, in businesses, where a contractor is, driving some of our revenue, revenue is going to be delayed, as well as, other situations where the contractor is going to get unhappy with us because they're getting delayed, and maybe we won't be their favorite person to work with again in the future.
Yeah, I think, the retention is super important, especially, you kind of mentioned businesses that run on contractors. What does that really look like? What does that mean? Most of the time for us, that means that the contractors are performing some kind of revenue generating services. So, a great example of that is telehealth companies where they work with a whole bunch of different mental health providers or doctors on a contract basis that are providing consults and working with patients in most of the time a remote setting. And acquiring and retaining those contractors is both a really difficult endeavor, but also a really expensive endeavor, which is why kind of contractor experience matters, especially for businesses like that, because in absence of that being difficult to do business with, it being hard to get paid, know when you're going to get paid, whether or not that number is accurate, et cetera, can really have some kind of downstream effects on your ability to retain those contractors, but also grow your business long term. One question that we get all the time, Kerri, is basically like, hey, I've got this, human capital management, W-2 payroll system. Why is it from your point of view that can't just be used for onboarding and paying contractors?
They're not purpose-built for contractors. A payroll system is purpose-built for employees, though they do dabble in paying contractors, but it only works in certain circumstances. Like if it's a steady payment all the time, every single pay cycle, they get a steady amount. And then if they don't get a steady amount, then there's something like bill.com where they can submit an invoice, or you can set up a recurring invoice and get paid that way. But then at the end of the year, you'll have some contractors on your payroll system, some contractors in your AP system. And when you go to file the 1099s, you're kind of going all over the place trying to figure out which ones you need to file, which ones are being filed for you. So having something purpose-built that is just dealing with contractors, it's one source of information, which is always the best thing.
Yeah, and we kind of see there being two main categories of tools that folks use to try to solve this problem. The first, to your point, Kerri, is the W-2 payroll that you already have in place. These types of systems are going to do a really good job at onboarding W-2 employees, paying them on a bi-weekly basis based on a salary amount with some kind of variable compensation. It's predictable. It's processed on the same day. There's consistency in terms of the cadence of the business itself. That obviously goes right out the window for contractors, and adapting to that and kind of allowing for the advanced payroll processing functionality is really important, which brings us to account payable systems, which do a better job from a flexibility perspective. But it's almost like the W-2 payroll is too rigid. It's too much for W-2. The account payable is too flexible. And, if you're buying pencils the same way that you pay your contractors, something is missing there. And we kind of see account payable as like, they do a really good job at payables and invoices and managing vendors for various kind of supplies and business needs. Where they fall short is actually managing that contractor life cycle. So that's what we kind of have laid out on the right-hand side for what actually rolls up into using a contingent workforce and making sure that those workers can be onboard verified, that you're tying invoices to payments so that it's accurate and reliable and auditable, so that you can manage different approvals and pay policies for different sets of contractors. Even little things like tabulating payments, because a contractor can accrue payments over time. So how do you go and process those in batch and make sure that that's accountable and accurate, et cetera? And this is kind of what we see as, a key set of capabilities to consider. A lot of times these are being solved with human work. So, what can't be solved by systems is solved by people. Kerri, I'm curious, how have you seen that played out? And what's the burden on the finance team in those types of scenarios where they have to try to figure out how to do these really critical business processes without the right tooling?
Yeah, we're doing a lot of manual work. We're sending a lot of emails, a lot of follow-ups to get that W-9 form in so that we can actually set them up. And I can't tell you how many times I've gotten an illegible, somebody decided to actually take out a pen and write that W-9 form out, and I can't figure out what number. Is that a 6? Is it a 9? Is it a 3? Which just causes a lot of problems. And when your business is running on contractors, the last thing you have time for is for a lot of back and forth with the contractors going, and we've seen instances where, I get invoices from contractors and they keep using the same invoice number over and over again. And from an accounting standpoint, my system hates that. I need one invoice number for every invoice. And it can just create a lot of work for us manually to try to go through every single contractor, getting everything that we need, setting them up properly.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And we coincidentally have a slide to visually demonstrate that, which is really this nightmare of paperwork. What's that, Kerri?
I have felt this way many times in my career, very many.
No one wants to be in this spot, whether you are the accounting team or the contractor themselves. And I think what's kind of interesting in this space is that, if we go back to these systems, ultimately the legacy payroll is designed for W-2 employees. The account payable systems is designed for finance. Nothing is really kind of in place that solves for this mountain of paperwork that is created as a result of working with contractors. So today we want to really peel apart that onion a little bit and start to dig into what that looks like, both in terms of common pitfalls that we've seen folks fall into, but also different strategies and different approaches that you can use as account payable and finance professionals to help alleviate some of this administrative burden, ultimately helping de-risk your business, so you're not kind of introducing compliance and classification risk, but also driving, better efficiency, lower cost to serve that contractor workforce as well. One quote that we've got from a customer of ours, Brett Pfeiffer is the COO of Crew Group, and they are an independent claims adjusting firm. So basically, they work with a lot of different insurance carriers, especially in response to catastrophe events, and they help them process insurance claims as a result. And one thing that Brett pointed out in working with him is that their W-2 insurance claims adjusters will naturally have longer lead times when it comes to onboarding because, it only happens once. They can do it ahead of time, and it's not kind of an on-demand or in-response action as a result of a catastrophe. The contrast to this is very stark around 1099, where when they need those adjusters in field, right, there's 50 states, there are insurance claims in all of them. They really need those contractors today. Really that means they needed them yesterday. So driving efficiency and reliability in this, and I think standardization, we'll get to what that means, is super important when it comes to onboarding contractors as well. Kerri, can you walk us through, we have some examples of different kind of onboarding requirements. Can you walk us through different versions of that you've seen in your career and what to really look out for as accounting and finance teams think about onboarding and making sure that that worker is eligible for the work that they've been hired to do?
Sure. The first top of the list is going to be getting that W-9 filled out and properly and legibly. So once you have all of that information, then at year end that you can file the tax forms for them. We also need to know how to pay them. What is their bank account number and stuff. And then, like you were talking about the insurance adjusters, there's a lot of different requirements that are needed, from different licenses to insurance, verification of skills. There's a lot that goes on that are really critical in order to make sure that who you've hired and who you have on board is the right person for the right job.
And Kerri, I'm curious, what are some of the kind of different industries where like licensing and insurance is going to be super important? Whereas, I work with graphic designers all the time. I don't need them to have a CDL or car insurance. How have you seen that play out for accounting teams, especially when it comes to onboarding?
Oh, you mentioned telehealth earlier. You need to verify that they have the correct documents, that, they are legally allowed to sit in front of somebody performing this service to them. And there's also with the insurance adjusters, they need to have their own set of different insurances, a lot of them, so that they are, covered in different situations. So it's going to be different for all different places. But those are just a couple of examples.
Yeah, that's super helpful context, Kerri. And in terms of, kind of the best practices for streamlining that contractor onboarding, what are some examples there that you can share with the team for how to approach this in a newer, better way to kind of change that outcome?
Yeah, the best thing is, automation. Automation is going to be key. When you're not doing everything manually, you'll have a better experience. There's less chance for risk. There's less chance for error. So some of the ways that you can automate things, I've used recurring invoices in the past so that I make sure that I have the backup in the system. I have the correct information. I have a different invoice number coming through each month. I've also used real-time TIN verification systems so that, I know that the information I've gotten is correct. And then I've also found ways to automate payment notifications so that, I'm not spending a ton of time getting a hold of contractors to let them know that the payment's on the way. I've had this set up behind the scenes. And the next important thing is standardization. I typically have created packets in the past where, each contractor would get a packet and I would explicitly write out, okay, this is the W-9 that I need you to fill out. And here are the areas you need to fill out. Don't just put a couple of them filled in. I need everything. Also with the ACH information, just trying to get them to fill in the exact, routing number, everything that I need on there. And then lastly, I usually try to give them an invoice template. Some of them are going to be great and have their own invoicing systems, but other of them, this might be the first time they've had to invoice out. So I want to make it clear that we need a different invoice number. I want to make it clear that I need to, as an accountant, it's really important to understand the service period so that we can get that into our books. And then self-service, lastly on here, is just being able to have the contractors have one way that they can get a hold of potentially multiple people at the company. So I've set up in the past like an email address like contractor support, and they only have one place to go where they know I need to update my bank account. Something has changed, I'm having an issue, and there's multiple people on the company on the email thread so that you can all take turns jumping in and doing your part for answering it.
Yeah, those are, I think, really great ways to approach the problem. And I think that like naturally dovetails into some of the mistakes that we've seen that are, obviously avoidable with some of the solutions. But Kerri, can you shine the light on kind of where things might go wrong in this process and maybe what to be aware of?
Yeah, we've had some of our customers tell us that, because of the fast pace, because of so many contractors at once and not having a great system, that they've accidentally paid the wrong contractor. Like that's just one contractor didn't get paid, and two, now you have to go to another contractor and ask them for the funds back. So that's happened. Or bounce payments because you have the wrong bank information. There's other instances where, the amount of times that I get to the year end, I start to try to file my W-9s and realize, wait, I'm missing a digit here. Or the times that I get those dreaded letters from the IRS telling me that I have submitted the 1099 with incorrect information, and now I need to go and try to get that information to fix it all.
So Kerri, I got to ask, how is it going back to the contractor and asking for the money back from a missed payment? I can't imagine that is the top of the list of things to do for the day.
It is the worst. It is the worst. Yeah. So you have two people angry. The one contractor who's like, where's my money? I've completed what I said I would do. And then somebody else, really? Did you ever pay me?
Like, actually, I've spent it, but good point. Definitely, some things that you want to avoid. And I think too, that's where, standardization, you pointed out in the last slide, but it's super helpful where worst case, you already have the information that you need, but by, using that standard process and the standard set of materials that you collect from all contractors will hopefully help alleviate some of these challenges. Well, that wraps up the content. And Kerri, thank you so much for sharing your perspective. It's hugely valuable. I'm sure for the folks on the line and for myself as well. We want to open it up to Q&A now. So feel free to suggest any questions that you have in the Livestorm portal. We do have a couple of questions as we went through. So let me take a look at those real quick and we'll dig into Q&A. Give me 1 second here. Okay, so the first one, Kerri, is from Julia. She's asking about classification. And her question is, how do you think about classifying a contractor as being on a 1099 or when they should flip over to a W-2 status?
That's a really important question. And one of the first things I'm going to say is that we're going to dig into that a lot deeper in one of our upcoming sessions. As well as on Wingspan, we've actually created a guide that will actually show you a lot of great information, both from federal to state level about what that is. But in a nutshell, one of the ways that I like to think about it is employees are told where, when, and how to work. And contractors are not necessarily doing that. They cannot be told exactly those things because they are independent and they can take on other projects at the same time, which when you're a full-time employee, you usually are just working in one place, or you should be.
Yeah, but we actually have, that sparks a thought, which is we have a checklist for classification that might be helpful that we'll share with the folks after the webinar that kind of walks through, a few different ways that we think about this. Like, obviously we're not your lawyer, but we are happy to provide some guidelines that might be helpful. One other question that came in, Kerri, this is a big one, so buckle up. But Aaron asked, what's the biggest piece of advice for thinking about how to get started modernizing our back office and maybe, systems or processes that you would start with. I added the last part on myself, but fundamentally modernizing the back office. Where would you get started, Kerri?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is, modernizing means automation to me. Getting into, getting out of spreadsheets, getting out of these manual processes and stuff. I mean, I'm going to age myself a little bit, but I was doing, accounts payable back in the day where I would be writing out paper checks and putting them in envelopes to sending them off. I mean, I don't think anyone's doing that anymore, but like modernizing just accounts payable by going into something that sends the payments out for you. Modernized payroll by just using PEOs, what has health benefits. And honestly, Wingspan, modernizing how you work and how we work with contractors and how we can make it much more easier for them.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Super, super insightful, Kerri. One other question from Michael was, what information should be included in a contractor agreement?
That's really an interesting question. I would definitely, you want to put in a lot of information, right? You're going to want to cover, like, is there a specific start date? Is there a specific end date? Obviously the rate that they want to be paid in. Also any caveats, like there are certain milestones to when they get paid. Are there certain things that have to be done for them to get paid? Are there clauses where they wouldn't get potentially paid for certain items? But overall, you should talk to a legal team in the end when you're writing out these contracts, because they're the ones that are going to really help make sure that you're saying the correct things.
Gotcha. Super, super helpful there. We've got one more question I want to touch on, but what are, here, give me one second. I'm sorry. So this is around handling taxes and payments for 1099 contractors. How have you seen that handled on the accounting side, and what kind of services do you provide to the contractors for that specifically?
Well, in a conventional business, you can't help them at all with the taxes. You pay them the full amount, and it's up to the contractor to put aside those funds for another time once they file their taxes to actually, pay for the taxes. That's kind of the standard process. Here at Wingspan, we actually have a way of helping to withhold the taxes so that, you don't accidentally spend the money. I know personally, I did that as a contractor. I would have a hard time, saving for the rainy day at the end of the year. I wanted those new shoes.
Yeah, it turns out 30% adds up really quickly.
It does.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Well, that wraps up Q&A for us today. I just wanted to thank everyone who participated and joined us today. We hope that this was beneficial. As I mentioned, we're going to be sharing the recording and the slides after the fact. Please do register for the second track of our webinar series all around payments and actually calculating and processing those payments for contractors. Thank you again, Kerri, for joining us and sharing your expertise with the group. It's been super helpful to have your perspective. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their week.
Thank you, David. This was a lot of fun. I really do hope it was helpful for everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.